First of all, let me say welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maureen Kelly. I work in the Development Department, the Director of Individual Giving here at Children's Home and Aid. And you are part of a wonderful experiment, and we are truly grateful to everyone to make time to come and learn a little bit more about how things are going at the Rice Center. In the time of COVID, we just realized that we needed to find new ways to connect with donors and share with you the impact of your work, of your gifts, and how it's impacting kids' lives. So this is our first time, so forgive any technological quirks that happen, but again, we're interested in continuing this series. There will be more, and you will be hearing more about it. Just a couple of housekeeping things. There will be presentation from Keith and Will, who you'll learn about in a moment. Throughout, you are welcome to post your questions. If you hover down, you should see a Q&A button. That's where you can post questions. We will gather them. We will make sure that if anything that doesn't get answered in the time that we have allowed, we will follow up with you and make sure that your question gets answered. Also wanted to let you know that we are recording the webinar, and so it will be available for folks to watch afterwards. And so that's another opportunity. If you know other people that maybe would like to hear and would like to forward it, that we will make sure we'll do that. So with that being said, I am delighted to introduce our President and CEO, Mike Shaker, who's going to take us off.
Great. Thank you so much, Maureen. And I just want to welcome everybody. We are delighted to have you with us. Thanks for taking part of your lunch hour and spending it with us at Children's Home and Aid. I did want to give just a brief update on how we're doing at Children's Home and Aid. I want to start by saying you're going to actually hear from two individuals and one of very few programs that throughout sort of COVID has had to operate sort of business as usual. More than that, they've really had to operate not only the way they always historically have, but also in a way that sort of recognizes the new challenges we face. And I know you're going to hear a little bit about that, but I wanted to tell you that at the agency, we are fortunate because we've got great donors and supporters like you, that despite the cancellation of multiple events, which we certainly need to do, we have felt an incredible level of support from our donors. And so this is an opportunity for us to keep that engagement going and obviously recognize you and thank you for all that you do. Children's Home and Aid continues to operate all of our programs. We continued operating all of our programs from the time, even the early days of the quarantine, but we were doing it differently. We've got a good percentage of our workforce that is a blended of remote working and also working out in the community. All of our early childhood centers are open. We continue to operate crisis nurseries in the northern part of the state and in the central part of the state. And of course, we are operating Rice. I will say that while our engagement of families has been terrific and we're hearing a lot from them about the level of support they felt from Children's Home and Aid during this incredible time, we're also increasingly aware of the fact that we've got a rough couple of months ahead of us with a lot of uncertainty. We're still seeing a lot of unemployment. We're still seeing a lot of families concerned about housing instability. We still see families concerned, particularly multi-generational families, about the actual virus itself. And so we know as an organization that's there for families in moments of need that our work has got to take the long view, and we are planning and poised to do that. But before I get started and introduce our speakers, I did want to reiterate one more time, again, our sincere thank you to all of the donors that have stayed with us and supported us, even as our historic ways of raising money and awareness for our programs have had to change. We appreciate it. We appreciate you showing up today, and I'm really delighted to get on with the conversation today. I want to start by introducing our two speakers. First is Keith Poland, who I am proud to say I hired almost 14 years ago, I think. Keith is a licensed clinical social worker. We stole him from another program. We were working with an incredible team of experts at the University of Illinois Chicago around rebuilding Rice. He came highly recommended. They knew him, and I didn't wait too long before we dragged him to Rice and said, we'd like you to be a leader here. He has been the director of Rice since really 2007. We moved him into a new role earlier this year as Associate Vice President, where he's actually overseeing not only Rice, but also our other behavioral health programs in both Chicago and Rockford. Just a little bit of his background. Keith received his bachelor's degree from Western Michigan University, and he received his master's degree in social work from Loyola University Chicago. And he has worked within the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services and in direct care in residential treatment. He was doing that work long before he joined Children's Home and Aid. Finally, Keith also serves on the board of directors for the National Association of Children's Residential Centers. It's also my privilege to introduce Dr. William Sackley. He is our clinical manager. He really kind of steers the ship in terms of thinking about how our clinical and therapeutic services are not only organized, but how we deploy those services, and also has a huge hand in terms of the training of our staff. Will himself is a licensed clinical psychologist, receiving his doctorate from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. He actually came to Rice 12 years ago, started with us as a student intern, and we have been unwilling to let him leave ever since. And he oversees all of our clinical treatment, as well as the implementation of a breakthrough evidence-based program, collaborative problem solving, and the neurosequential model of therapeutics, which, if that sounds like a lot of words, you're going to hear a little bit more of that from Will. So I'm happy to turn it over to Keith and Will to talk a little bit more about Rice. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and welcome, and thank you for everyone for joining us. I took a brief look at the invite list, so I know there are some friends of the Rice Center out there that probably have heard my little song and dance here multiple times, and equally excited to see a lot of new names out there to talk about what we do here. So here at the Rice Center, we serve in a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week therapeutic setting. We serve kids who are involved in the Chicago or in the Illinois child welfare system. They are under the care of DCFS. Kids with some of the highest emotional and behavior challenges in the system. Kids come to us after being not successful in the family settings and other treatment settings to really address their needs, with our goal really to be returned these kids to a family setting. We've been doing this work on this property for, I've sort of lost track, but I think it's about 113 years, and we're privileged to have a lot of history of the place, and every time I look back at it, you know, we've been doing this sort of work relatively the same over that time span, hopefully better and better every day. Typically at the Rice Center, our average length of stay is around 16 months. We have a real target to really do this work in less than 12 months with our kids. Kids coming in, getting the services that they need, and getting into a family setting in 12 months or less. We have a lot of challenges that we work with our stakeholders in to be able to meet those goals. But our goal really is to get the kids the help that they need and get them home, get them into a home setting safely where they continue to engage in their treatment. Will really get into the details of how we work with kids, but our approach really here with kids, families, and stakeholders is to work collaboratively with them. That yes, the kids are here and we work with them day to day, but everybody has a piece in child and family success. So we work closely with families, with grandparents, with case managers, with teachers, everybody who has a stake in the kid's life has an impact that they impact the kids stay here at Rice. So our goal is really to build relationships both with the client, the kids that we work with all the stakeholders, and figure out what does this kid need and how can we deliver it to him or her so they can, again, leave in the shortest amount of time. We really base our work on what we do here, and we'll get into it again shortly, but building relationships, having rules and expectations, and when those rules and expectations are challenged because our kids have lots of challenges, we work with them to figure out, okay, how can we do things better the next time? How can we build skills so when we're in a family setting that we can negotiate these challenges better so they can be successful in their homes. When I think about our treatment services, I think about 3 specific areas, though, as Maureen said in her opening, every single person in this building has an impact on kids' lives. But first being the milieu services. We have 4 living units where that are divided. They are co-ed settings, so we try to divide them, 5-4, boy, girl, girl, boy. Placed based on sort of development. Our age range currently is 6, which is actually sort of wide. Our average age is under 11. On the milieu, I think about it as, my living room. It's what are we doing tonight? When is dinner? What is recreation? And all those sort of experiences give us treatment opportunities to work with kids. What is challenging about sitting through a 15-minute or 20-minute meal? What is challenging about working out problems with your peers or siblings to pick what game we're going to play on the Xbox? These are everyday things that my family most of the time negotiates pretty well, but these kids really struggle with. So really everything being a treatment opportunity when they're on their units in their living settings. The piece that Will heads up but really impacts everything we do is our therapeutic services. This is our team of master's level trained therapists that provide individual, group, art, and yoga therapy to every client. Each client receives a different level of those services based on the individual needs, but really given the age of our kids and their developmental needs, it's really figuring out what the kids need and how we deliver that to them. What we are in the process of adding to the RICE program over the next couple months is bringing in an occupational therapist, one with a specialty training in mental health, working with this population. It's been the newest sort of trend in our industry, and we really believe that this specialty training will support so much of what we're already doing and will really impact the kids and families we work with further. We have on-site medical and psychiatric services. So we have our pediatrician that comes in once a week. He is our primary care physician. So does all immunizations, physicals, and then triages any specialty medical services out to appropriate providers. We have 2 nurses that do the day-to-day stuff, which is Band-Aids, I fell down, I need the ice pack, to really managing some of the more complicated things. Most being right now is taking the lead on our COVID response and keeping kids and staff healthy here in the facility. We also have a consulting psychiatrist that spends a day with us, really doing the psychiatric med management for all our kids. Important part of our treatment team, but just one part of it. And if Dr. Wilberg was on the call, he would say, his services provides the access for the kids to engage in everything else here. So we believe that is an important part for our kids, but it is far from the only part or the only service that our kids need. And lastly, we provide case management, and the case management that we provide really allows us to continue to look at the kids' treatment every day. What are the challenges? Who needs to be involved? Who do we need to engage? What needs to change almost day to day, and then communicate that to stakeholders. Hey, we need more of this from case management, or we need a little advocacy from this office. Really, it impacts the kids directly by us not losing sight of what each individual kids needs. Lots of other stuff that takes place in the service or in the program here, spending time in the community, YMCA, field trips. When our kids leave here, they're going back to community. So we need to teach them how to negotiate a YMCA, a library, things that, again, we take for granted, but these are the challenges. These are the kind of things that challenges our kids. The last thing we talk about is transitional services. So services that prepare kids to leave. And historically in settings like ours, even in ours, that started at the end of treatment. Really in this time when we're trying to reduce length of stay, we begin to talk about that on day one. It's these kids have these challenges today. What are they going to need 6 months from now to be able to manage these same challenges in the family? What does the family need to be able to help manage and work with the kids in the setting? The old model of residential treatment was residential treatment would fix the kids and then hand them off. Really what it is we need to work with families to learn how to fix kids, build skills, so the family is also learning the same thing we're learning along the way, so they could be successful in the home. As if this work wasn't complicated enough, that we had families coming in and out of the building, kids going in the community, then the middle of March happened when school shut down. And then a few weeks later when we really needed to kind of shut everything down and look at things differently. We do things as a community, monthly assembly, dances, outings in, just big group outings to the zoo. All this goes against the COVID, social distancing, keeping each other safe, and really needed to go from one day being this big community where everyone had contact with everyone to, okay, how do we manage this and manage it on the fly? And it has come with challenges, and we've had to figure that out over the last few months, and now are really beginning to emerge. Okay, we're still in COVID, but how can we still have our Halloween celebration as we always did that hopefully we'll touch on. I think, over this last few months, we know what we do well. It's really been the challenge to figure out how do we do that in this COVID world while keeping kids and staff safe throughout. So I'm going to turn this over to Will. As Mike said, Will is a tremendous asset to this program. He has come and left and keeps on coming back, and really has pushed us to become the kind of treatment facility we want to be. And then his latest challenge is now doing this in a COVID world. So Will, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I want to talk to you more specifically about how we see the work that we do at Rice and what we do about that. And if you're thinking, why am I listening to a guy in a headset? You're probably not the only one. I'll call that out right away. It is because my computer microphone is broken. This isn't a preference, or I don't think it gives me some kind of authority in speaking about this stuff. So first, let me talk about the kids that are at Rice. They all have experienced some type of trauma, and it has happened during their formative years. And if you'll bear with me shortly into the science here, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk about why this is so important. And it's just going to be one slide, so it's not going to take the whole time. This upside down pyramid is Bruce Perry's work, and it's a representation of our brains, with the bottom part, I can't point to it. I'm going to circle it with the mouse. Right here, this red portion being back here, the part that connects with our spinal cord, and this top part, the blue part. Our brain grows upwards and then outwards, forwards, with this part called the cortex and the frontal lobe being the most uniquely human portion. And the reason that I show you this slide is because we know that during the first 4 years of life, these pathways from the bottom and pathways towards how to modulate emotion and regulate appetite, blood pressure, etc. They form at a rate that we don't see again at another time in life. It's not that they stop forming after 4 years old. It's just the rate is so fast. And why this is important is because access to the frontal lobe helps with so many things. It's what you probably have heard this when you hear people talk about ADHD and other things about we want kids to plan, we want kids to organize, the executive functions. All that stuff is in the blue section of this mock brain. And our kids have limited access to these things. Their pathways have formed differently because of what they've experienced between these 0 and 4 years. They've all experienced some type of trauma. So the reason I bring that up, it begs the question, knowing this, how do we intervene here at Rice? And what we want to do is we want to meet the kids where they are. That is more often than not, if I'm drawing a line like here, down. It's not up in the place where you can explain things to them and have them plan and think ahead. And if you look at some of these things on the right side here, these correspond with the brain area if you were to go across. Body temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, arousal, motor regulation. We are on the cusp of having an OT in the building. I know we Keith talked about that a little bit. And that's going to be a paramount intervention to address some of these areas of the lower brain. And we're really looking forward to that. But currently what we do to meet kids where they are when they're in sort of this lower brain region is called TheraPlay. And it's a really great intervention. It's actually right here in Evanston is their institute. Some of the things you'll see our staff doing, or therapists in particular at the beginning of a session, is taking a kid to get hot chocolate as a ritual to begin session. What is that doing? Well, it's meeting this kid right here at appetite as a ritual. Like, we're meeting you where you are. That's what we're trying to do. Trying to recognize that if we come at you with, can't you just think ahead, which would be like top down, and do what we're asking, that's not going to work. But if we meet them where they are and then go up towards these areas, we can build pathways that are more lasting. Another thing you'll see staff members doing all the time, if you just come in the summer or even as late as it gets, today it's supposed to be 70, guaranteed you'd see someone in the courtyard shooting free throws or hoops, playing catch with a football. And that might seem benign, but it's actually very intentional. It is intentional trauma-informed lower brain regulation. And we try and do as much of that as possible. Here's the coolest part though. While we're doing those things like playing catch, we're also building relationships with the kids. And that is the key factor. I'll stop sharing. In our treatment program, is we are a relational treatment model. And we believe this because trauma inherently is a relational breach. And that's from the work of a guy named Bessel van der Kolk. He's got really interesting work. He wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score, if you're familiar with that. So at the core of a trauma, something happened where they were supposed to be able to trust an environment, a person, and that was untrustworthy. I'm not trying to blame families in any way for that. I do think that circumstance has a lot to do with skills that are being used. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that from a relational perspective, a kid was supposed to be able to trust an environment, or neurotypical kid would have been able to trust this environment or this person, and something bad happened or something traumatic happened. That's super important because what we really want to do is we want to have kids build skills to navigate the world. And trust and attachment is at the core of that skill development. I'll give you an example, and I like to have people answer me, but since I feel like I'm talking to myself right now, I'm just going to answer my own questions. Kid falls down, scrapes their knee. Where do they go? They go to mom or dad. Mom says, don't worry, honey, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it, puts a Band-Aid on it, sends them back out. I mean, even let's take the old school dad example. Dad says, rub some dirt on it, you're fine. Kids back out playing. Objectively, is the cut on the kid's knee any better? No. The parents made them feel better, and they borrowed their parents' regulation to navigate the distress of that scraped knee. That's trust, and that's the impact that trust has on emotion regulation. It's necessary for this skill development. What do I want to say here? So I wanted to also highlight how CPS plays into that. Sorry about that. I'm looking at a couple notes. We have a treatment program called Collaborative Problem Solving that teaches our staff the philosophy and mindset, as well as some concrete skills about how to interact with our kids to foster the kind of relationships that I'm talking about, these trusting relationships, these helpful relationships, these relationships built on solving problems together as opposed to telling kids what to do or expecting them to have the skills that would come with the frontal lobe. And obviously, as Keith said, COVID has thrown a huge monkey wrench into these types of treatments, with families, trying to build relationships with people for the first time via a Zoom call is not the same, or with a mask on, not the same. We've had enforced medical recommendations to isolate kids. Think about how that takes away from the lower brain regulation activities we were talking about, the relational activities they can do, the things we can do as a community, not to mention potentially re-traumatizing based on what's happened to those kids in the past. And this is all on top of the normal difficulties of working with this population, which are many. I don't actually know where I'm supposed to stop with this presentation, and I could ramble on and on. So I'm gonna stop myself and let Maureen take over and see if we have any questions, and I can answer them more specifically instead of just rambling into no man's land.
Great. Okay. I think, thank you, Will, so much. And Keith, I think we're all going to come back. We do have some questions. Let's see. Okay, great. Hi. Okay, we do have a couple questions that have come in from the team. And so, Keith, can you or Will, either of you, can you sort of take us through a typical journey? How does a child arrive at the Rice Center? What brought them there, and what do you do once they're there, how to get them home as quickly as possible?
Sure. And then Will, how about, and we'll do this on the fly, I'll do the front end, how kids get here, and then Will can illustrate how he fixes them. So, as I mentioned in my little bit, our kids are under the care of DCFS. So DCFS, when they decide that a kid can no longer be in their home setting, there's a safety concern, abuse or neglect, they place them in another family setting. A lot of our kids, or the kids that we work with, have these behavior emotional challenges that families just aren't able to meet the kids' needs. So there's a process where they seek out the appropriate treatment facility for kids. Our specialty population is what we refer to as younger kids. So we serve 36, that's our capacity, at one time 36 younger kids. In the state of Illinois, I believe right now there's probably about 60 to 65 young kid beds. So we're serving kids from all over the state, which poses challenges when we talk about getting kids back into the community. But we work with the caseworkers who are assigned to these kids to figure out, okay, what's a good outcome? Where can these kids, where is the appropriate placement for when they're done with treatment? And then right at the beginning of treatment, day one, we begin to work towards discharge. But a typical kid or a kid that goes through treatment looks like what, Will?
Sorry, I was muting myself. I think they come here scared and feeling like, what is this place? So, I mean, even at the very basic intervention, they come into a fully decorated room, lots of colors. One of the first things they do is they go to a printer and print out things that they like and hang it on their walls with staff members. So we have these rituals to try and make them feel welcome. And the clinical team, along with the case managers and the the direct staff have a huge say in this because they work with them so consistently. We identify the needs of the kid and we turn that into treatment goals. We like to think of the needs of the kid as what are the barriers to being in a home or being discharged. So not necessarily like emotion regulation needs to be perfect, but in what circumstances do they become so dysregulated that a parent wouldn't be able to handle them? And what skills can we help give the kid to be able to handle those situations? So treatment is individualized. You might see an emotion regulation goal for more than one kid. However, it applies to different circumstances. And the teams really drill down to identify these circumstances and give kids opportunities to build skills around there. Another portion of this is where are they going next? And joining with that family, hopefully, where they are. No judgment. There's a lot of love for these kids and they are tough kids. So oftentimes they've been in homes and, suicidal ideation, trying to jump out a window and an aunt says, I just don't know what to do when this happens. So joining them where they are, working together to find a way for the kid to be in a home is our goal. Other things that we do here, the kids engage in group therapy, but we try and identify their strengths, what they like. There is a lot of providing for them in terms of like art and movement and yoga. Again, an OT is going to be awesome when it comes to thinking about how to regulate oneself with body movement and activities. But we do provide therapies from all kinds of angles that are developmentally appropriate for young kids. We don't think about these kids as being able to go through a workbook and that's done. We're trying to see what types of work that fit with them and then promote that as much as possible. We have 2 art therapists on staff. We have a yoga therapist on staff. They do drumming, they do dance, lots of different things. I'm not sure if that answers the question completely, but I do think that one of the things that has happened with COVID that really has increased the level of dysregulation that we've seen is I'm sure that you've all felt this in your own lives in some way. It was like a freeze button was hit in March and it's just slowly defrosting and everyone's kind of like, when is it going to freeze again? Well, that happened to the child welfare system and these kids, they lost a lot of hope of where they were going next. They thought, I'm going to be here forever. And if I'm going to be here forever, like, what? Why should I work with you on this to address this barrier to discharge to be in a home if I'm never going to a home based on our philosophy? And it's been really hard on them. Also for the frontline staff, you think about the anxiety that comes up with COVID, even leaving your own house. I'm sure that you can, empathize with the people who come in every day with a multitude of people in the building, even if we are wearing our good stuff.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Will. We had another question, and I think you addressed it a little bit about does the impact of COVID, are you seeing it impacting kids on that brain scale that you shared with us? Is COVID impacting their behaviors at those deeper levels? Is it effectively causing trauma?
Yeah, I think that, how do I want to say this? They have regressed in a lot of ways because certain parts of treatment have been unavailable. Certain community activities have been unavailable. For a long period of time, we weren't even allowed to have multiple units in the same place, so they couldn't even see their friends. Just because of our setting, the restrictions on technology are way higher than you would for a neurotypical kid. Why? Well, they're a vulnerable population. We can't have them on Instagram engaging with strangers. Their youth in care. So they don't even have that type of access with their friends. They're also much younger than like Fortnite age. Some of them might be Minecraft age, and they play that stuff too. But I guess what I'm saying is it's been hard on them in terms of relational contacts and things that can help. Additionally, like we couldn't allow families in the building for a long period of time. FaceTime is just not the same. We all know that. Visits, something they look forward to and are internally motivated by. And then what happens on the visit for a grandma, for instance, to communicate like, hey, this person did this on the visit. Can we work on that? As like the next step, it feels like it's got momentum, like it's moving forward, like it's going into a home. It's totally been put on pause for them, and it's really difficult.
Yeah.
You know, Maureen, I just want to jump in for a second. As I listened to Will, obvious, but wasn't obvious until this moment, is COVID has put a pause on everything we believe in. It's community, it's face-to-face relationships, it's fluidity of in and out of the building, getting people going, and all of a sudden on March 13th, that came to a screeching halt. This is what we tell every kid, every staff, every day. This is what we believe in. All of a sudden, we had to stop that and now adjust on the fly.
Yeah, it's been quite a challenge. I guess one of the questions that I have is, as I hear the challenges and the struggles it has been for staff, Will and Keith, is there, what keeps you going? Is there a story, a moment, some kind of a case or a situation of a child that kind of inspires you, that keeps you going and keeps you sort of holding on to all the good that is happening at the Rice Center, even in these challenging times? Just any story that you think of that you could share.
Can I start, Keith?
Go ahead, Will.
It's not a particular story, but I do think, Maureen, and we talked about it right before this, we are adapting, and that process forms a different type of community than I think I've ever experienced. So that's one thing that I really do appreciate. And I'll talk about, we have Halloween coming up. The kids aren't allowed to trick or treat to houses. But we are going to do a trunk or treat in our parking lots, and then we're going to decorate the playground, and all the staff get dressed up in costumes to be with the kids there. We have some activities. They're going to do pumpkin decorating in the cafeteria and caramel apples on their units, and I think they have like a dinner plan. They love that stuff. And we have for the most part, we have some adolescents who are going to shake their heads at those activities and say no. But for the most part, we're like 8 to 11-year-old kids, and they are going to have a blast. And they're going to dress up, and we'll probably do some kind of like mock fashion show for them to show off their costumes while they're decorating pumpkins in the cafeteria, and they're going to have a blast with it. And it's those types of things when we can come together as a community that really, I do think, keep me happy here.
Maureen, again, not a particular story, but the same story. Early in COVID, we had, I'm thinking of, I think 3 kids off the top of my head that were getting sort of close to discharge, but maybe not, we were unsure. But these families, all 3 of them stepped up and said, in this age of COVID, these kids need to be in a home. And in a way, I think the COVID accelerated their discharges because the families began to look a little differently at these kids and what was important to them as a family. So, and we're beginning to see, I think, again, some movement now as people understand COVID a little bit better and with kids being able to move out again. So fingers crossed. The other piece here from roughly February through COVID, we had a tremendous hiring spree here at Rice for direct care workers. I think partially because the job market crashed and we were always hiring. But what has been, so we've hired a bunch of new graduates in early spring who stepped into a very hard job on the best of days into a COVID world, and these staff have stuck it out. We're teaching on the fly because we're watching COVID, but we're also trying to provide the training that Will and his team do. But they're still here with us, and maybe training has needed to slow down, or the experience has slowed down a little bit because of COVID and some other things, but they are still here in it with us. And to Will's point about, appreciating the community, I've really appreciated every one of our staff who've stepped up. These new staff in particular, I'm really amazed.
Yeah, great. We have a couple questions. One in particular, just wanting a little more, if you can, Will, update on the process for the OT position and where we are. I know there was a new director hired, but just go ahead and address that. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think we want to get the ball rolling on that again as soon as possible with the new director. We had been waiting for school to start to see where that would take us. The challenges have been many with COVID, and the roles of people have changed to as it necessitates. So when you have a group of kids online learning with no teachers here, the therapists and case managers have to step in a different way than, say, if there was a group of teachers here teaching with teachers' aides and we're free to do the jobs, I guess, in the job description of Children's Home and Aid. So one of the things that was putting that on hold was we wanted to bring someone into an environment that was a little bit more stable, where they could actually perform the role and job description, as opposed to have to come in and do, half residential counselor, half occupational therapist. And I do think that we have school starting in a week.
Wow.
So that's huge, as well as our new director to help solidify what this position looks like in the building. So I'm hopeful that that's coming right down the pipeline.
Yeah.
And for those folks who are on the call, Will, that maybe don't know about the occupational program that we're going to be doing, but you have shared with different settings stories of kids who, just a specific kid that will really benefit, like a circumstance that may be really impacted by the use of the OT program. If there's any in particular that come to mind that you can share, that would be awesome.
I can't do names, right? So I'm going to have to do a description.
Names. Yeah, that's totally fine, yes.
A kid came into my office yesterday and he said, "Why can't we wrestle here?" And I'm like, I don't even know how to begin to answer that question to a 9-year-old boy, coming from a family of 3 boys where we didn't stop wrestling until we turned 30. Like, I don't even remember what happened, but it makes so much sense to me. This kid wants to wrestle with his 9-year-old friends, and we can put him in football once a week, but that's not enough because he wants to practice tackling. And he has this need for sensory input. I believe it's called proprioceptive input, but don't quote me on that. An occupational therapist would know. That I'm doing research on how he might meet that. An occupational therapist would be like, here we go, blah, blah, blah. Here's the diet we're going to put out for this kid. So it really is an invaluable resource that's necessary in the building. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and it's just the idea of trauma being stored in the body, and that occupational therapy being able to access it in a way that other programs cannot. Okay, I'm just trying to monitor our questions that are coming in both through email and not. One question, which is lovely, is what can people do to help? What do you need most? What would be useful now and ongoingly?
It's interesting that I didn't share this in my intro. Is a big part of our program has been volunteerism. It's always been volunteerism. It's more adults coming in the front door, the better. Kids don't want to see my face or Will's face every day. They want to see the college students that come in. Obviously, that has ended with COVID. We cannot have the volunteerism take place at the level that's impactful. So in a non-COVID world, that's my first go-to. What right now is just any sort of support in terms of, we got our holiday gift drive coming up, and most of our donors are back, but some, have been impacted by COVID, so they won't be back. So helping us secure hoodies for 36 kids is needed. As we've begun to go out in the community a little bit more, and maybe being able to, there's now opportunities to rent movie theaters for groups of 20 or more. So help with that because that's something normal that we do. It's really now from a distance. It's just any sort of financial resources, anything that can help us at least bring some normalcy to what we usually do. The challenge for me and for everybody is, okay, so we used to go to the ice rink, but we would do it, with the rest of the community. Now in the COVID world, we have to rent the ice rink. Everything's just a little bit grander, a little bit more planning, and with that comes resources that are being stretched really thin right now.
We did have another question that came in, Keith, about just the finances. We talk about our key funder being DCFS,
yep,
and just the discrepancy with the amount that DCFS pays and the actual cost of providing service and how that works.
Yeah, so we proudly talk about I'll call it, our Cadillac here at the Rice Center, having extra case managers, having yoga therapists, being able to hire this OT. Our funder, who has stepped up in the last year, has increased their funding, but still maybe pays for my Volkswagen that I drive. And I really think about it as that DCFS covers about 80% of our cost. It's the 20% that we get from grants, private funders, that allows us to do the fun stuff, the stuff that these kids really benefit from. The other piece, which is important here, is that the agency has undertaken a tremendous investment into staff, all the staff, but I'm thinking about our residential counselors here, increasing wages. The hardest job in child welfare is the direct care worker, who up until recently was making about $29,000 a year. On average, we've been able to give our direct care staff and a lot of our other staff here now about a 15 to 20% raise, and really still closer to what they really do, but really an investment in that. But that, again, comes to our bottom line here at the Rice Center. That's about a $500,000 increase to our budget. So for us to be able to retain staff, have the staff that we want and services in place, we really do rely on the private support of donors.
Excellent. And just to reiterate that the cash support, the additional expenses, and I'm not sure if Mike is on, he texted that he had another issue that came up, but the additional costs that we have incurred with just trying to staff up for COVID has been tremendous. So all of the unrestricted, just general support is so hugely helpful, beyond with also providing help to our families. Keith, just one other question. I'm sorry, we did have a specific question, which I should have started with, which is, can you just define what occupational therapy, just give a little more background into what that is and how it's different from some of the other therapies that we do?
If there's an occupational therapist on this call, they're gonna
I think you're good.
botch the let me start the story where I know, but an occupational therapist would be able to trace this way farther back and apply it more specifically to our population and trauma. But I will say that our most base input is sensory input, and it happens on a level that we don't necessarily take into account. I'll give you an example. Did you feel the chair you're sitting in until I called it to mind? So it's there, and we have different sensory capacities that are regulating to us, and they differ from person to person. So for me, I love jogging. I love exercising. That's a great way to regulate. Some people are like, give me some tunes, give me some music. Other people want to cook. They want to smell food. They want to taste food. And that's a very regulating experience for them. We all have these sensory things that we do. And to my knowledge, what an OT does is they do assessments and break down what things are regulating in healthy doses to kids, and especially, and more specifically to trauma, what Maureen had said about how it was Bessel van der Kolk, the body keeps the score where it's stored, maybe, unlock via sensory activity, these things that are stored in the body. I don't know if is that enough?
I think that's great. Yes, thank you. Well, that's wonderful. We do have another question, and it's regarding follow-up care. Are we able, or how are we able to check in on the children once they've been discharged? And even if they don't go to a children's home and aid home, are we able to keep in touch? And I know that, Keith, we did have a donor, I'm not sure if they were able to join us, who helped us with the NUDM money, helped us with that partnership. And I know that some of those funds were going to be used to do some of this. So if you could address it, or Will, whoever wants to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I'll take that on. And it's a very timely question. So currently, and what we've always believed here at the Rice Center, and certainly the first day I walked in, is once a Rice kid, always a Rice kid. It always blows me away when the 27-year-old walks in, 10 years later and says, hey, I was a resident here once, tell stories, and we find out that they're really reaching out because they need something and they know this place exists. So aftercare never ends. In the treatment model, or in the treatment sense, is that we follow kids closely for 90 days. We have been providing support to the families and the caseworkers out. We are the expert on the kid. Call us. Don't call the police if there's trouble. We can figure out what the kid needs in the moment, or maybe needs long-term, because we're the experts. So we do stay involved that way. We are entering into some new federal legislation, and that is looking at how services in general are provided in settings like the Rice Center. And I proudly say we are going to be piloting some of these things throughout the state. We're going to be involved technically for 6 months after aftercare, and really what that is, what that's going to look like is, what does this kid need from Rice? Is it regular visits from their favorite residential counselor? Is it some ongoing therapy in the transition with their therapist? Is it some support from our pediatrician because they built up a relationship? We don't know what that means because it's going to be individualized for each kid. So we're going to be required to do it for 6 months. But again, once a Rice kid, always a Rice kid. We have, I believe, 6 staff that have been here over 25 years. So somebody knows everybody who's reaching out. When somebody reaches out, there are still connections in the building, not just to the building or the memories, but to tangible people. And that really is impactful for the kids and young adults that we work with.
Excellent. Okay. We did have one more question about, which we may have sort of addressed, but again, I think if we can share particular stories are always good. It's just for folks to understand. You talked about wanting to reduce the length of stay. Right now it's at 16 months and we're trying to get it down to 12. What are some specific ways that you would do that? And if you think of an example, Will or Keith, of like, here's a kid where this particular behavior and how we work to mitigate it.
Yeah, and if you could come up with an example, I'll let you jump in. But I really say, when we begin to work with kids, we don't have magic powers. We figure out what kids need by working with them, not telling them what they need, but just they give us something, we work it out with them. That's how kids get better here. What we really need is for families to be with us on the first day, so they're learning those things along the way. We also need families on the first day because they know how to put the kid to bed at night. They know these little things that we don't know the kid's routine. We don't know the favorite food, but these are the things where we can build a relationship together, share our collective experience, so it's not 6 months of us figuring it out and then 6 months of teaching a family what we figured out, but rather our collective togetherness is over the next 3 to 6 months, we do this together, and a kid can really transition more smoothly into a family setting. We know when kids have family involved earlier on, we have better outcomes.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too, and just reiterate the point. I'm working with a family right now, currently. And, you know, I don't even think about this question as an individual treatment question. If you put a kid at Rice for a year, they're going to make some progress for the most part. We're going to identify where they need to make progress. We have individual treatment. We assess that really well. But this family right now, how do we decrease length of stay? Well, we engage grandma who doesn't have a home, and stakeholders say, well, she's got to know how to get a home before we can send a person there. It's like, no, help her get a house. Let's help her. Let's advocate from this point of view. And you talk to grandma, and the love for the kid is so, it just emanates from her being. So I think that advocating for our families and the people that we work with and joining with them where they are, and not thinking about like everything they're doing as maybe as pathology, but just struggle in general because life is hard sometimes, is really, really a key factor in decreasing that length of stay.
Hey, Maureen, I just want to jump in. I want everyone to understand the majority of our kids enter DCFS and ultimately end up with us, not because they're being abused, but because of neglect. And neglect is tangible things that we can fix. Neglect could be poor housing, as Will just pointed out, and I don't know the circumstances there, but we can help that. Take that off the table and then address the mental health needs or the needs that the child and parent needs. So it's really re-looking at what the problem is. Don't pathologize families, but give them what they need so they can move forward.
That's so perfect, Keith, because we're coming close to the end of our time. And so I wanted to bring in Mike Shaver, if you can come back. I don't know how we magically make Mike appear, but because what you just said is so powerful, Keith, that most of the time the kids are coming in because of neglect and things that are easily fixed. And so I just thought, Mike, if you wouldn't mind closing us out. I asked Mike on the spot to say for a couple words of inspiration about what is the call? How are we as a community of donors and staff working together so that these kids can be in loving homes and families sooner, faster?
So first of all, again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. One of the things that we are intimately aware of at Children's Home and Aid is that the work that we do and the impact we have is ultimately based upon relationships. You heard that in Will's comment. You certainly heard it in Keith's comments. And our ability to make those relationships that actually build and form the basis of kids beginning to heal, for us to understand that some of the challenges they face are grounded in science and biology, and that we can play a part in shaping that. The underlying theme is that it's all about relationships, and that is what we do as an organization. That means we've got to have the resources we need to support staff, to train staff, to keep staff engaged. And we are really being intentional about that work. I know that one of the things, probably just because Keith is too modest to talk about it, but when Keith and I started working on Rice, we really had this vision around Rice that would not be a place to keep a young child that was struggling in family-like settings for 4 years until they basically aged out and couldn't be there anymore. We had this vision where we would engage families differently. We would relate to them differently. We would engage the children differently. We would relate to them differently. And if we did that, and we're intentional about that, we could actually be a short-term treatment, identifying for a kid what are some of the strengths they need to build, what are some of the problems they need in order to function in a family-like environment, which is always our aspiration. It has served us incredibly well. We are a handful of early qualifiers as a qualified residential treatment program, where there is an acknowledgement that the work we do at Rice is treatment. And that is the priority for this work going forward. It's the funding priority from the Department of Children and Family Services and also the federal government. None of that is possible without that. Transformation was only made possible because we were able to bring an extra set of resources, commitment from folks in the community, dynamics like the phenomenal support from the Northwestern Dance Marathon. Those are the kinds of things that are making a difference, providing that occupational therapist, providing an enriching program, so that experience is really based upon the relationship. So that's the work that we're in. That's the work that you help us do. And whether it's Rice or early childhood or our work in Intact Family Services, you make it possible. So thanks for coming and learning about that. And Maureen, thanks for your work and playing facilitator and fielding the questions and keeping folks engaged.